today I want to show you how God can give to you. And perhaps He doesn't make you rich in the way you're thinking, but He makes you rich. He makes you where your life is fulfilled and where you're able to enjoy it. And so as you look at the people back then and the way that they did those things, God did, provide for them. Their crops grew like crazy. Everything they planted grew. Does that work for you? Every single seed you plant grows and makes another plant and everything works? It doesn't for me. Not here anyway. Doesn't matter how many tomato plants I put in the ground. I got no tomatoes. And that just seems to be the way it goes. But every single thing that they did grew and prospered and was great. And that's one of the things that you see as a blessing from God there. What I want you to understand is He's saying they were fruitful. And everything that they did worked. All right? Did that make rich? Sure, that made rich. That made them have a lot. But I think that's what's important to do and to understand with this. There's something in there talking about the hundredfold. If you remember that, there's a lot of things that can destroy the hundredfold. Things like hardships or things like too much blessing. That also takes our focus away from God and destroys it. And then we talked about the rich young ruler and about the fact that, he wouldn't give up his treasure here to get the hundredfold, to get the treasure with God. He was so intent on hanging on to here, and he just couldn't do it. And so as you look at this idea of increase, we see people who come to church or who believe in God, and they tend to think, well, God's going to give me more. Yeah, He does. As long as you're giving to Him and following Him and doing for Him, God blesses. And that is the kind of God we have. But I want you to understand exactly how it works, because I think a lot of people end up disappointed. They end up with, I need money, God, give it to me now. And when it doesn't show up, they go, I'm not sure I believe in God anymore. I think that happens sometimes, but let's look at what it's supposed to be. The passage that was read to us from Luke chapter 6 and verses 37 and 38 are just scary verses to me, because they talk about this huge abundance that we're going to get. In the context, the verses just before this talk about some pretty hard things also. They talk about loving your enemies, blessing those who hate you, praying for those who abuse you, turning your cheek if someone strikes you, loving everyone, doing good, lending, and expecting nothing in return. Those are hard things to do. And then, out of all of that, he comes to this last one, and he talks about judgment, condemnation, forgiveness, and this huge blessing of something being so full you can't hold it all. What an incredible thing that is. It's the type of person that he blesses. Is the one who's able to deal with enemies, who's able to bless those who hate him, who's able to pray for those who abuse you, who's able to turn the other cheek. And that's the type of person. And then he comes down to this part and he says, judging is according to how you treat other people. We get to start that. You realize that? We get to start whether someone's going to judge us or not. And when we start judging and say, oh, well, I don't like that person, or I don't like this person, or they did this, and we want to talk about them and tell all about them and how bad they are and what all they did, then we get talked about. It happens every single time. Then we get talked about. That's just the way it works. And he says, when you judge, you get judged. Because other people around you hear the judgment and they say, okay, we'll set the standard there. That's exactly where the standard will be. We had a guy in another church. You don't know him. Put that in there first. He was extremely good at everything. He did all kinds of stuff. He was one of the bus captains. He was very good at getting studies, at bringing kids to church, at just doing all kinds of stuff. But he was also very critical of the other bus drivers and of the other people. And maybe they didn't have quite as much talent as he did, or they weren't quite as direct as he was. And he was one of those guys that was just able to do so much. And he was very critical of them. And everybody heard that, understood that, knew that. That's just the way he is. And so that's the way it's going to be. Anytime you're around him, you're likely to get criticized for what you did, because he's just that way. But then again, he did do a lot as well. And so you couldn't fault him for that until he started getting older. And then he didn't quite remember everything. And then he couldn't quite keep up. And then it wasn't quite as easy to do all those things anymore, because once you get older, you start losing a step or two. Yeah, I could amen that one also. And the judgment was still on him, because he had been this way all of his life and been so critical of everybody else. Okay, you're the one that did this. You're the one that set the standard. You're the one that said all of this. Now, what about you? We don't need to judge anybody. We don't need to condemn anybody, because the judgment will come back on us. Well, how? Who told? You know, it doesn't even take that. I don't know how it works, but somehow everybody knows a critical person. Don't we? You can tell. I mean, you don't have to talk to them for more than 5 minutes, and you can tell this is a critical person. And that same judgment comes right back on them. A person who condemns, exactly the same thing. They go around condemning everybody else. Guess what? No slack given to them. The same thing. And this works whether you're in the church, out of the church. It doesn't matter where you are. This is a matter of how God made the world. And then he goes, give and it will be given to you. Well, that's an incredible thing. To give and it will be given to you. If you forgive, it will be forgiven of you. It works the same way with sin. If we forgive others, they forgive us. If we don't forgive others and hold them, they don't forgive us. And you'll find the people who are fighting that way all the time. This idea of judging, when you judge one another, it's amazing to watch. I saw this: when you judge another, you do not define them, you define yourself. And that's really what happens, isn't it? People know, okay, we're the person who judges. But this idea of giving, give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, that's always impressed me. How do you get something to fit more in the jar? Will you kind of tap it and shake it and try to get all the marbles or coffee or whatever it is to get down in the jar, because you can get more in the jar that way. And God says, I'm going to do it that way with you. And so we find the principle of God's generosity given to us. And he says it's going to be as much or more than you can hold. It's all pressed down, shaken together. It's everything will be put into your lap. There's a couple different ideas about this. It may be the fold in a person's robe where they form kind of a pocket. You know, because they didn't have pants. They wore robes, and well, you could fold a robe up and maybe sew something and get a lot bigger pocket than when you can get in somebody's pants. Or it could be it's put into your lap. It could be, you know what, it's your whole lap. And that's, how much can you hold in your lap? Well, quite a bit compared to a pocket. And so it's all put in there. It's all something that you're able to have, something that God is going to bless you with. It's this idea of generosity. It's 100-fold, 100 times as much. Our small investments we have turn into something bigger later. It's what he's trying to get across. And so when we invest some, say it was money, how much do you have? How big's your pocket? Well, that's a lot, isn't it? It's not quarters, though. I don't even know what that is. Maybe it's pesos. Whatever it is, it's a lot. And so whatever small amount you had, God blesses. And I just want you to see that. He puts it into your lap. If you're a kid, maybe the thing you're thinking about and what you want most is a whole room full of balloons. Okay? That's an abundance of balloons, isn't it? There's a bunch of those things. Put them in somebody's car, fill the room with them. I mean, that's a lot of balloons. You may just be able to blow up 2 or 3, but that's a whole bunch. Or, if you're really thinking about abundance and you're a rabbit, then that's a lot of carrots, right? How's he going to eat that many carrots? Well, he's eating those right around him. You just eat your way out, I think. But this idea of abundance, I think we all understand, and we all see it, and we all want that. We start small, and it gets bigger. And God does those things. And that's the way in which it works. But taking that's the idea of increase. And then, how many rich apostles were there? Well, none. I mean, some of them started fairly well off, but I'm not sure they were really rich by the end. And how many rich Christians do you see today? More we see the people who need something coming to God and then asking. And how many people in the church are millionaires? Maybe a few. Not that many, right? So what happened? What is this idea of God giving to us, and how does it really work? Well, let me just ask you first of all, how much do you need? How much do you need, actually? Do you need more than what you have now? Or are you way maxed out over what you need, and you're well into what you want? And those two terms are very, very different. Being filled and having abundance may not be in things. And so I think we need to understand that. More stuff does not make us happier. You just have to clean it, change the oil in it, dust it, put it somewhere, make sure it still works, and shine it. It's a lot of work. And so more stuff doesn't necessarily make happier people. And I think that's important for us to understand. We have an abundance when we don't need more. So how is this idea of increase and of God giving to us going to ever play out in a society where we don't need more? Doesn't make sense, does it? Somewhere along the line, we've got to work this out. And this is only in America. I mean, you go anywhere else in the world, and I think, there is obvious need. And so we understand that part for them. But what about here? So let me give you a couple of different things that Jesus talks about. The first one is John chapter 10, and he's talking about a sheepfold. He says, "And Jesus came, and he said to them, 'Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who come before me are thieves and are robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep.'" And so as you look at this, Jesus starts talking about abundant life. Okay, you're alive now. How do you make life more abundant? Is it more years? I don't think so. I mean, we've got abundant life in Naomi, right? She's getting there. She's had a lot of years, maybe more than some of us will have. Has God blessed her? Absolutely. But I don't know that he's saying that's the way it's always going to be, is you get more years. I think abundant life is about a quality that you're able to have here and now. And so I think that makes a huge difference, is this quality that you're able to have. When Jesus talks about this idea of a sheepfold, let's run the parallel with that. He talks about him being the door of the sheep. The sheepfolds back then were a lot of times stone walls. And so the shepherd would keep all the sheep inside at night, let them out to pasture. But he had to protect them from the wolf. And so the wolf was going to come, steal a sheep. He gets dinner, but the shepherd says, "You're not stealing my sheep. Not on my watch. It'll have to be over my dead body." And that is exactly what would take place. He lays down in the doorway so that if the wolf is going to come, the wolf is only going to come in through that one door. He can't get in another way. And the shepherd says, "I'm the defense." And so Jesus is saying, I came for your protection. I came to provide for you. Psalm 23 talks about the green pastures and the cool waters and the still waters and about all of those things and about how it is that Jesus provides for the sheep. And it's a great picture of calmness. The thief and the robber is the one who decides to come into Jesus another way. He says, I don't have to do all those things. I don't have to make a covenant or make discipleship. I'm just going to sneak in and ignore the process and then steal away a lot of the sheep. Well, he's after the leadership of the sheep. But abundant life is in this safety, in this protection, in this not having any need. Because all they do is follow the shepherd, and the shepherd shows them where the water is. The shepherd shows them where the grass is. The shepherd shows them everything that they need. The shepherd does not give a sheep a new car. A sheep doesn't need a new car, but he does not do that. He didn't fill all their wants. So what if the sheep complained? Just a hypothetical. Some sheep said, I want more. This is not good enough. I want to have some more. Then he leaves. You see, what happened with the early church was they sold their land and they gave and provided for some of the people, not so that they would have more, but so that they would have what they needed. And I think that's what we have to keep in mind, is realizing this. It was not just to get them more. It was to get them what they needed. And I think dealing with want is one of our biggest temptations we have in our world today. We think it's normal. We think it's good. But boy, be very careful. Sometimes want doesn't come out well. Sometimes more doesn't mean abundance. You know what more means? Junk. Do you have a garage like this? We've got more. I've got so much more, I don't know what to do with the more. How do you store all this stuff? Where do you put all this stuff? Yeah, I took a picture of your garage when you weren't looking, didn't I? Abundance doesn't mean more. Abundance means fruitful. Otherwise, you're stuck with a garage that looks like this, and he's giving you more and more of things you have to shine and put gas in and take care of and insure and everything else. And it's like, oh, I don't want more. He says, I'm going to take everything in your life and make it work. Every process in your life can make you fruitful so that you are filled with the fullness of God. Now, that's a lot different than having a garage that looks like this. But I think some people come into church and go, I want more, I want more, I want more. Let me go to a class and it'll give me more. Let me go to this class. Let me listen to a sermon and I'll get more and more and more. And so they're collecting and doing this. And what ends up is they look like this spiritually. They got a garage full of junk. Because none of those classes ever made them more fruitful. And we have Christians with a whole lot of religious junk and religious baggage, and they don't know how to live abundant life. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks. How do we make our life abundant? How do we be fulfilled in God? Because it's not always just about more. Yeah, we're going to have new classes starting up, and I want you to take those classes. I want you to let it change your life so that your life is more abundant. Not just you got more information, Not just you wrote more pages in a notebook that you stored away somewhere and forgot about. Is that your life is more fruitful. And it has changed in that way. And we produce fruit because we live, and the fruit that comes out of the Spirit is this love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control is seen in our life. And we have this abundant life because we take all of this and we're able to do it. He talks about the vine and the branches. He says he's the vine. We're branches. And what do branches do? They don't get more stuff. They produce more in their life that is a natural process of how they live. Do they have more? Yeah, absolutely. But it's the way in which it interacts in their life. It isn't a whole bunch of junk that's all been collected that makes them feel terrible and guilty. Paul learned this secret. And I think it's important for us to realize and look maybe at somebody who is able to understand what this is about. And so Philippians chapter 4 and verse 10, Paul has been rich. He's the college professor. I mean, he's been the one with money. And he's given up everything for Christ. The money, the reputation, the prestige that he had before. As he writes in Philippians toward the end, he says, I rejoice in the Lord greatly that now at length you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. And I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. But in any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. And we misuse that passage so often because we think it says, God's able to strengthen me so that I can do anything. It does not say that. It would be nice if it said that. That's another one that we get frustrated with God. The passage is about money. It's about the support that he's got, and he says, I'm thankful you have sent something to me. It's about the more. It's about the abundance. That's what it's about. It's about how we deal with those things. It's not about doing difficult tasks, although this is a difficult task if you're having to deal with money and shortages and things like that. He has learned the secret of abundance. And the secret is, I never think of myself as being in need. That's it. I never think of where I am as being in need. We're about to send some people to El Salvador. If they bring some pictures back, they're going to show you some need. There's not a person in here who is like that. I don't care if you're living in a car. They don't have a car. They are people in need. We are not. Paul, in his situation, living in prison where he was, says, I am not in need. I've learned how to be content there. I've learned how to have plenty. I've learned how to have abundance. I've learned how to abound. And the secret is, I can do all of this through Christ who has fulfilled me. He's given me everything. It is through facing things through Christ, in need or abundance. I am okay with him. I've learned to be content. If he wants me here, I'll be here. It won't last. It'll get better. And if I get really rich, it won't last. It'll go back down, right? That's the way it works. Christians who are not content are a contradiction. You got that? They don't know how to be happy where they are. And God has put you where you are. Unless you have really disobeyed him and put yourself in a different place. But generally, God has put Christians where they are and said, you're in a good spot. And we need to look back at him and go, yes, I am. And I'm going to worship you from here. Not look back at him and say, it's not enough. I want more. You're a God of more. You're a God who blesses. And God's going to say, yes, I am. But if you can't feel satisfaction or this contentment, it doesn't matter how much you get, you're never going to be content. It is not about the stuff. It is not about how much you have. The secret of abundance is being content where you are and seeing the abundance around you and what God is doing. We're going to be talking about this a lot more and about how this abundance works. I have one story I wanted to show you. It's in 2 Kings 4. And I know you're supposed to use an internet story, but I didn't have a good internet story, and so I'm going to use the Bible. I hope that's okay. The Bible tends to have good stories in it also, and so I want you to understand the story in 2 Kings 4 of what that's all about. And it is about learning this secret of being content and realizing what riches are. So in 2 Kings chapter 4, they have a wicked king, and Elisha is the prophet. And things are difficult and bad because their nation is not doing all that well. There's a lot of wars and things that are going on around them. And Elisha is one of those great prophets of God. But the nation itself isn't benefiting, but some people do. It says, now the wife of one of the sons of the prophet cried to Elisha, your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, but the creditors have come to take 2 children to be his slaves. Now that's not a good situation, right? You've got the preacher and they're going to take 2 of his kids. Okay, well maybe that's fair with the preacher because you know how those preachers' kids are. Yeah, mine are gone and you haven't seen them, so don't show them this tape. And Elisha said to her, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what have you in your house? And she said, your servant has nothing in the house except a jar of oil. And he said, go outside, borrow vessels from your neighbors, empty vessels, and not too few, and go in and shut the door behind yourself and your sons, and pour into all these vessels, and when one is full, set it aside. So she went from him and shut the door behind herself and her sons. And as she poured, they brought vessels to her. And when the vessels were full, she said to her son, bring me another vessel. And he said, there is not another. And then the oil stopped flowing. And she came and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil and pay your debts, and your sons can live on the rest. It's obviously a God solution, isn't it? What an incredible story. Would you like for that to be your story? Would you like to be in that situation? Could we see that as a blessing? I think the answer is obviously yes. This is a time when God has blessed her. Would you ever see this as abundance? Probably not. Is this abundance? God gave her what she needed. God gave her the miracle. The oil stopped when the jars are full. Elisha uses what she has and makes that more fruitful. Do you get it? What's your jar? What's in your jar of oil? What's the source where God blesses you? Sometimes we're full, but we just don't know when to quit complaining. We have an abundance, and we need to realize the blessing of God. Those jars need to be full. Those jars are ones that God fills all the time. And we're able to see this great abundance. It's not what we have, but what we enjoy that constitutes abundance. I think she thought she was rich. I think one sign of abundance is not to be judged or condemned. What a great blessing that would be. Another sign of abundance is forgiveness. There's not a single thing that you've done wrong that hasn't been dealt with and done away, and no one holds anything against you. And abundance starts when we're one of the sheep that follow him. He's at the door. He's going to lead. He's going to guide. And wherever he leads will be good. It will be abundance if we just realize it. I don't think Paul regretted any decision he made as far as his giving up things for Christ. Do you? Do you feel like God's not blessing you? God didn't give you more. What you're really saying is, my life is empty. You're not going to get it with more. You're going to get it with abundance if you're able to find the abundance of God. So I hope today you're able to do these things and you're able to realize that we can be forgiven of our sins because Jesus came for that. He died on a cross for that. We are not thieves who are trying to take eternal life. We realize that, yes, we make a covenant with him. Yes, we obey the Scriptures. Yes, we're baptized into Christ. Yes, we worship him. Yes, we do all of those things that God wants. We are not trying to steal the blessing of God or salvation from him. And when you've done those things, you realize God blesses incredibly and makes you fruitful.